Very well, thank you.
Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, so my name's Erin Harrington. I'm the founder of Soul Values, and I'm the author of the Whole Life Planner, an integrated toolkit for purpose, productivity, and peace. I help uh, high achievers, but basically anyone that wants to succeed in life, strive uh, uh, to unlock their potential, right? And I help people basically retrain their autonomic nervous system so that they can be more effective and be in that executive state rather than being stuck in the stress response, which is very common for busy high achievers, right? And when you're in that stress response, you don't think as clearly, you're not as effective, you're not able to make um, good decisions, you're not creative. And so I help people like that just basically get more done and experience more happiness across all areas of their life by making these small micro hacks effectively.
Yeah, I like that. I think there's actually a lot of people who live in that kind of stress state a lot, right? I know a lot of people who listen and watch the show work in emergency services as well, for instance, and that's a high stress environment.
Yes.
Um, so how do you actually go about helping people with that? How do people seek help? Because a lot of people would just think, oh, it's just the nature of the beast, and you can't control it. It's just really stressful, and it is what it is. So what would you kind of say to those people?
Well, stress from my perspective, stressors are real, but stress itself is an active choice. And when you start to look at stress like that, you're more in control naturally and the results are super powerful. So, for people who can't really even imagine the possibility of this, I can assure you, I mean, I've experienced two major burnouts in my life. And by using these neuro hacks and cognitive retraining that I've developed over the years, I'm able to be more effective and experience more harmony, wholeness, and ease. And my clients are saying the exact same thing, right? So while they have these laundry lists of things that they need to do, want to do, being pulled in lots of directions, both work and life, family, all sorts of things like this, I help them sort of integrate that into this concept of wholeness, like I mentioned, so that basically they're working more effectively with their nervous system so that they can get more done without that stress, because stress literally hijacks us. It makes it really hard to get anything done. So common experiences are overwhelm, spinning, shiny object syndrome, and burnout. Burnout would be the worst. Of course, health issues, very serious health issues can occur. So I just like to help. It's my mission because I've experienced major burnouts myself, and because I figured out how to do this. It's my mission now to help others learn how to tap into this with greater ease.
Yeah, it's quite surprising actually as well how kind of common burnout is. So I did a little bit of research before the show, and in one study, I found that 76% of employees experience burnout at least sometimes, and high achievers, like you say, you work with, are disproportionately affected,
Mhm.
which is that's quite daunting, isn't it? 76% is a lot of people.
Right, and it's honestly not talked about enough, and that's why I do what I do, because I want to help people realize that this is very achievable with simple daily hacks. I think the other thing I want to add is that, the problem that high achievers or people who basically strive for success, the problem that they are experiencing, or there's three problems. One is when they try to push through stress, which is the most common experience. Their brains are stuck in that survival mode, which literally undermines your stress. The other thing is when you compartmentalize work and life, which is extremely common, it creates unnecessary tension and competing priorities. And then the third thing is striving for perfection. A lot of my clients that I work with are, I wouldn't call them perfectionists. They have perfectionistic behavior, and that's super common with high achievers. And that again leads to burnout, and basically sacrificing your well-being. So I want your listeners to understand that you can solve these problems collectively easier than you imagine.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually, because I've never really thought about it, but I definitely compartmentalize, and it's a very separate thing. You know, my home life, work. There's a clear divide between the two. Um, it's quite interesting actually. And I've never until now. You make me think about it. I've not even considered that or considered what kind of impact that actually has on me, stress wise and any other way. How would you kind of deal with that element?
Well, so one of the so in my book, there's a bunch of worksheets and goal setting sheets and things like this. But I also do the same thing with my clients in the sense of when you set your three goals for the quarter, your three major goals, for example, I encourage them to set three goals across all life domains. So work and life. You can't just leave out goals in life, right? Because it's part of who you are intrinsically. So yeah, I work with them to identify the three goals, but more specifically than that, I take it one step further, which is, the question, how will I support myself in reaching those goals? And that cognitive, like simple cognitive sort of awareness of how you're going to support yourself naturally gets yourself into your brain into that more effective parasympathetic state, also known as the executive state, where all the magic happens, right? Both in work and in life, you're just more effective. um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's it's true of a lot of things as well. It's just being aware of it is that first step, right? We have
That's
to
right.
acknowledge these things, because if we don't acknowledge it, then we're just going to continue to ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, right? And whether you're
That's
doing
right.
that consciously or subconsciously, but we need to kind of take the time to look at what's actually going on, what's affecting us, and how we can potentially change it. That's step one, right?
Hmm. Yeah. So I started, I sort of came into the field that I'm in by accident, to be very honest with you. And it started with two major burnouts that I have. Just to give you a little bit of background, the first one was at the height of my career. I was the top sales achiever for a martech company, basically, and we were having we went for our IPO. Again, I was the top sales achiever. I loved what I was doing. I was making incredible impact, but I basically, in the last um, set of months leading up to that IPO, I pushed myself so hard and didn't care for my total well-being. And that's what led to the massive burnout. And ultimately, I ended up retiring from that career altogether. And my second burnout happened when stress essentially collided with a number of very serious chronic health conditions. I have a neuromuscular disease that affects my brain, it affects my muscles, my connective tissues. And specifically, it affects my autonomic nervous system. And that's where I began to become super interested in how to hijack my autonomic nervous system to so that I could live a better life, right? Experience more ease, because it was pretty horrible before this.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I've done a like I said, done a little bit of research before we started the show, and you know, getting your parasympathetic nervous system stimulated and engaging in activities like the mindfulness and these deep breathing techniques and lots of other different ways that you can do it can actually reduce stress by up to 60%. So it shows the the massive effect it can have as well on us by actually engaging in behaviors and exercises to improve that and to engage it.
Right. Right. So let me ask you this, Erin. When you experience stress, when you feel it coming on, what do you do?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I don't think I necessarily have a blanket answer for it. It kind of depends on on how I am on that particular day, to be honest. Because generally, I don't let the stuff get to me. I don't. I've kind of built up a reasonable resilience over the years. It's not always been the case, but I've learned kind of techniques. I use the gym a lot as my kind of way to decompress. That's something that I've always done since I was 16. Really, I've always exercised, done sport, gone to the gym, and that works for me. That helps keep me balanced. So I continue doing that. If I go through a period where I'm not at the gym, I feel my ability to handle stress reduce, and it has a massive impact on me. But I do have other things that I do as well. I do I practice something called non-duality.
Hmm.
I don't know if I've ever heard of that, but
Of course.
it's essentially detaching. So I kind of able to do that. Um, Generally, I don't. It's not something I practice regularly, but if I particularly feel that stuff is getting to me, then I try to remember and go into that. And I listen to some. I don't know if you've heard of Muji, who essentially he does. He's one of the teachers of non-dualities. He was one of the people out there that kind of big on it, and he has a podcast, and it's quite a soothing podcast. He has a soothing, melodic tone, and there's the nice chilled out music, and he just gives me that reminder of the what I need to be doing. So I use that as part of it. um, but generally I don't get stressed very easily. Touch wood. I don't get stressed very easily in a specific situation. I'm pretty good in chaos and in that kind of stuff. It's the cumulative stress that really gets to me when there's lots of different things over a period of time, and I just feel like I'm not getting it and drowning. And that's what gets to me, is the kind of the slow death by a thousand cuts.
Right, right. I completely relate to that. But it sounds like you've done a lot of work in terms of managing, sort of like retraining your brain a bit to manage stressors so that you don't go into that response on a daily basis, which is super important. Exercise is one of the top ways to get your brain into that parasympathetic state. And so you're doing wonder. I mean, you're helping your body, you're helping your mind. Yes, so that's wonderful. I do that as that helps me as well. When I feel, if I have sudden, I'm not a very stressed out person, but if I, let's say I have a podcast that I'm preparing for, and I get a little bit of nervous, a little tiny bit of nervous beforehand, right? My go to is to basically just walk outside and wander around my gardens, no matter what time of year it is. That 5 minute reset makes a huge difference for me. So, yep, I'm wandering my yard.
Yeah, you got to find them. I don't, I have my own mechanisms, and I don't think everybody has the same mechanisms, but there are lots of different things out there, and I think you have to try and figure out what works for you and try and find what's effective. Really, it's not only what's effective, but it's what you will consistently do as well. It has to be something that you will consistently stick to. Because if it's something that you'll do, only when you're at your worst, then it's okay as a tool, but you probably want to stop yourself getting to that point and build up your resilience and try to get to a position where you can recognize the signs and nip it in the bud a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think, generally speaking, I think even things like calling a friend or going out with a friend, those directly can also well, depending on who you're meeting up with, can also reduce your stress. So finding what matters for you, what works for you, is a big part of is a big part of the challenge, because what works for you and what works for me is not necessarily the same. But generally speaking, what I would say to listeners is, the things that you love, whatever those things are that you love, add those into your schedule, because it will make you more effective and more successful overall in things that you do and the goals that you're trying to meet.
Yeah, I think there's something in being it sounds wrong when I say it, but being selfish, because it's not selfish, but it's something in looking after yourself first. Because we all try to, and I've been guilty of it, try to help other people when you're not set yourself. And I've used it before on the show, and I'll use it again. It's the old analogy of, when the face masks drop down on the plane, you've got to put yours on first before you can help somebody else. Because if you're not balanced and in a good place, then you're not going to be able to help somebody else effectively, and then you're both going to fail, really.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you have to fill your bucket first in order to give effectively to others or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. Yeah, I love that analogy. So,
Yeah.
uh, one of the things that I take my clients through, and also your listeners can have access to some of these tools and the free download that's included. But there's 10 simple prompts that I've created that I encourage people to use daily, ideally in the morning, and they're just prompts that are specifically designed to kind of push your brain into that executive state, and it works really well. Some of the prompts are things like, the very first prompt is "I'm grateful for," and one of the other prompts that I particularly love are distractions to avoid. I think when you consciously identify distractions that you know are challenging for you, or like, let's say it's social media or watching videos that aren't relevant to what you're trying to achieve for the day.
Guilty.
When when you when you identify those distractions, your brain doesn't want it quite as much. It's sort of fascinating. And one of the other prompts in there is "I'll support myself by." So consciously identifying how you're going to support yourself on that given day is really important. Like, maybe it means going to the gym, like you said, exercising, eating healthy, whether it's meditation or mindfulness or whatever those things are that make you happy. Identify them on that day. And again, it just creates this automatic sense of control in a situation where you might not have a lot of control, and it just allows more wholeness and harmony as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't take enough time to do those things. We're all so busy rushing around doing the things that we feel like we have to do. We don't take off the time to do the things that we want to do and that we know are good for us. It's always our health that gets pushed to the back, isn't it? Or, our own time doing stuff. And it's so important. And I think there's this view that it's selfish to do what you want to do.
Right.
But I think if we don't do it, then A, we're not living, and B, it's just going to make you miserable over time, right?
Right. Right. I think that's very true. I don't, it's, we live in a world where there's a lot of both fear of missing out and also imposter syndrome, specifically imposter syndrome, where you look at others and say, "Oh, they're doing this better. I need to work harder." X, Y, and Z. Even if you're a confident person, I think that is something that I see with a lot of the clients that I work with. Would you say your listeners tend to experience imposter syndrome that you're aware of?
I think everybody does, don't they, to a degree?
Right.
Yeah, I think I definitely experience it, and it's just it's one of those things. I think until is it born out of self esteem? Do you think that kind of thing?
I don't think it is necessarily about self esteem, because I experience imposter syndrome and I'm a really confident person. And I have strong self esteem, have for many years, even before I started doing these practices. I think it has to do with simply just wondering if it like seeing someone else and seeing the results of that and questioning your own internal voice, questioning your effectiveness. And it's sort of natural. It's not a great thing to experience, but it is somewhat natural. And I guess what I'd like to say is, when so for example, when I start to experience imposter syndrome, one of the things that I might write on my daily pages would be, in terms of things to avoid, would be social media, because social media is usually where I experience that type of imposter syndrome. It's not just, sitting here working and, um, writing my next book and things like that. It's actually when I'm on social media and I see other people's content and question the relevancy of my own content. That's really what it comes down to. Do you experience that a little bit?
Yeah, I get that. It, social media is a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's very difficult to figure out who's legit and who's not on social media, especially when there's a lot of people, pushing in all these different agendas. Um, so I try not to pay too much attention to it, and I don't take myself too seriously. So I think, on social media, I'm happy to mess about and make fun of myself and be silly. So I'm not too concerned. I used to be. I used to worry what people would think and stuff like that, but I don't anymore. I'm not fussed.
Excellent. Good for you.
So
Good for you.
yeah, it's took me a while to get there, but I've got to that point where I'm not fussed to what other people think, and I do it for everything I do. I'm doing it for myself now, so I'm not overly concerned. I think I understand why people would be and why they would struggle, and especially you see, it's difficult to understand sometimes why some people kind of take off and do really well, and others don't, even though they have a very similar message sometimes, and that that's still something I'm trying to figure out.
Right. I don't have the answer to that. I'm also
No.
curious about that as well. When you find out, let me know, please.
Will do, will
I'd
do.
love to know. um, well, going back to this concept of wholeness, you know, I, I believe when you track your personal goals and your professional goals together, you're able to achieve success much easier, right? Without some of the struggle, some of the symptoms of like overwork, overwhelm, foggy thinking, maybe cognitive challenges, not feeling very productive, any number of those things. Those are all related to um, your autonomic nervous system. And so when you compartmentalize them, as we talked about this earlier, that increases stress and decreases your effectiveness. But when you align them together, it naturally just fosters this sense of harmony and improves your decision making, which I think most everyone would want to be more efficient, right, in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's difficult to get to the point where stress isn't just something you survive. I think because I think that's one of my common phrases. People ask me how I'm doing, and my go-to comment is "I'm surviving." Um, but I think it's about getting to that point, like you say, where things can improve rather than just you're just treading water, just coping with what's being thrown at you. That you're actually improving through it, and that's the challenge for all of us, right?
Right. Yeah. And, when you use, I love how you use the phrase surviving, because that's actually that, that's your, when you're in your stress response, that is your survival mechanism, right? It's designed for you to survive tiger attacks, right? Out in the wild, not to manage day to day concerns about whether you bought the grocery item that you needed or whether you sent that email fast enough and use the exact language that you meant to use and things like that. So so yeah, I believe very much that these simple daily actions, like you're doing exercise, but if you simply spend 5 minutes and identify the types of things that are going to support you across work and life, all those domains, that cognitive shift literally retrains your brain. And this is backed by science. It's actually sort of fascinating. I learned how to do these things largely as a means of survival for myself, because I was really sick, very, very sick. with these sort of autonomic nervous system disorders. In fact, um, I have a pacemaker because my heart was stopping. And, you know, prior to getting the pacemaker, I knew something was wrong. I had a number of concussions, 3 concussions one summer. And my doctors were blowing me off. I already had pre-existing stuff, but my doctors were completely blowing me off because I think they thought, well, I know they thought it was in my head, that there wasn't really anything wrong. So I got myself to the right facility. They were testing me to see if I was having seizures again, and that's when they saw my heart was stopping, twice in one day. And then I left with a pacemaker, which has quite literally saved my life. But my point is that, I experienced a ton of stress in those days leading up to, or stressors, I should say, leading up to that diagnosis. And ultimately, by sort of aligning with myself, I was able to get the help that I needed. So, um, I think it's easy to think that external voices matter more than our internal voices. And I'm here to say that you pay attention to your internal voice. You can empower yourself. You can do anything that you want to do, regardless of the obstacles, and it's all achievable.
That is so true. We spend so much time looking outside for approval and validation and all that stuff when, it's not gonna, no matter how much validation you get or approval from outside, it still won't fix whatever issues you're feeling on the inside. So you still need to, you need to start with yourself
Right.
and look at yourself. But coming back to the pacemaker with yourself, that must have been, obviously that's a very serious operation and life changing thing to go through. How was you cope with that? Is that kind of, because that must cause you or have caused you some stress and some issues where emotional issues. I figure because having that kind of operation and that kind of worry is
Mm.
going to impact all aspects of your life, right?
Yeah, what's really interesting is the pacemaker went in, and it was an incredible validation of my experience and what I knew was wrong. So instead of causing stress or worry, I was like, "Oh my God, thankfully, I have what I need to stay upright and be functional and not like, not this was happening. My heart was stopping when I was driving. I would come to sometimes and be like, where the heck am I? So the fear and the stress went away once I got what I needed, because people believed me, friends and family who didn't entirely believe that there was something going on, my doctors, of course. So it was very validating. Um, when I, but I will say that, so that was only 4 or 5 years ago during COVID. Earlier in 2008, when I was first diagnosed with one of the conditions that I face, they diagnosed me with a progressive disease, right? And I had 2 children under 5 by my side, and it was terrifying. So that fear directly impacted my well-being, my relationships, my creativity, my daily function, my symptoms, all of those things. Everything was deeply negatively impacted by that fear. And so and I knew that essentially, but I didn't know how to fix it. And it wasn't until 2010 when one of my neurologists, who she's she's my autonomic nervous system doctor, because my autonomic nervous system has a number of dysfunctions, including the heart thing. So I go to this doctor for my 6 month check-in, and she would always start the appointments with, Erin, how's your stress? And then she would ask, okay, how are your symptoms? And this went on for a couple years. And finally, I said, Dr. Holer, why do you all like? Do you like me? Do you just want to know about how my stress is? What's going on? She's like, no, Erin, you know that stress is directly affecting your autonomic nervous system, right? So for me, when I understand what your stress is alongside your symptoms, I'm able to get a complete picture. And that's when the switch turned on for me. I was like, oh, I can control this, or at least somewhat, right? And so that set me on a path of, yeah, um, this cognitive retraining backed by science.
Yeah, it's quite amazing actually the physical impact that stress can have on us.
Yes,
I've experienced it myself, and it affects your sleep, your mood, your ability to tolerate other stresses. This it just plays such a big role in our lives, and it's a state that we're only ever designed to be in for short periods of time.
that's right.
That fight or flight, I suppose, kind of mentality and feeling. We're supposed to be there to deal with immediate danger, and then so we can get ourselves removed from that immediate danger. We're not, and in modern life, we tend to be in it for weeks, months, even years. Sometimes it's not that can't be good for us.
Exactly. No, and it- the this same nervous system that I'm referring to, the autonomic nervous system, where there's the fight or flight or the relaxation response, the two different sides. Just to kind of put it in perspective, if you think about all of your automatic physical processes, that's what your autonomic nervous system manages. So it's temperature, it's heart rate, it's blood pressure, um, cognition, muscle function, digestion, very much manages digestion, mood, as you mentioned. But any of those tiny little things together can add up. And there's, we have, it all starts with our amygdala, right, which is this tiny little part of our brain, in the back of our brain near the brain stem. And it's walnut small, like the size of a walnut. When we experience perceived stressors or real stressors, that that little part of our brain sends off warning signals to our entire body. And so those automatic processes that I just mentioned are affected, all of them at large. That's why sometimes if you're stressed, you might sweat, right? Or feel chilled. Um, your heart rate might go really high or it could drop. Any number of those things, right? And it can cause cloudy thinking. Cloudy thinking is a big one.
Yeah, that brain fog that we talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think one of the prompts in my book, I'll go back to my book again for a minute. One of the prompts that I have on these daily pages, which is part of the download that you can get, is dump zone, right? Many of my clients say that this is their favorite section. And the reason for that is because as we go about our day, we have all these fantastical ideas of things that we want to accomplish. Maybe we want to write a book. Maybe we want to start a new podcast. Maybe we want to do some kind of cross promotion with another entrepreneur. Any number of different things. Maybe we just like who knows? Maybe it's not related to work at all. Maybe it's just related to redesigning your kitchen. Big, small things, any of those. When those ideas come up on any given day, if you dump them, right, you're able to stay in that executive state as opposed to processing it, where your brain will start to spin again and effectively go into that fight or flight response where you're not going to have the same results. So when you dump the ideas, now you're not getting rid of them, you have a placeholder, you have a place that you can come back to. And so that increases a sense of efficiency.
Yeah, so it's just not about not holding them in your head the entire time, so you're not holding too much. I kind of like that idea, and I think I accidentally do that
You
without
do.
accidentally. I don't write things down. What I do is I'll either sometimes I do, very rarely I'll put it in my notes app on my phone, or but a lot of the time I'll just whatever it is, there'll be some sort of website related to it, and I'll just save the tab and just open the tab up and leave it in my um, internet browser for later on my phone. Um, but I've done that for a long time, and I kind of do that without thinking about it. That's not the reason I started doing it, to alleviate stress. I kind of did it and think, oh, I'll come back to that. But by doing that, it goes off my mind and I don't think about it. And if it's important, I do come back to it. If it's not, I end up, just deleting the tab, a couple of weeks later or something.
That's right. Brilliant. I love that you do that. Yep, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you're employing a lot of these concepts naturally. And they're not new concepts. It's not like I just created some of these. I just happened to package them in a certain way. Um, and likewise, I mean, celebrating your wins, I think, is also really important. And is that something that you do on a daily basis where you're like, okay, great, I wrapped up another podcast, whatever it is. And sometimes eating lunch or eating breakfast, um, and going for a little walk or getting exercise, or those are like big wins that shouldn't be underestimated, frankly.
Erin, I am terrible at celebrating wins. If anything, I play everything down and brush off any compliments or anything like that. I'm really bad. That's something I need to work on, and I'm aware of it. But I'm still not good at that at the minute. So, and I do see the value in it. I do think it's important. I'm just not quite something I'm not quite implemented yet, and something I need to be better at.
Give it a try for even 30 days to celebrate your win at the end of the day. And then you can add a second part to that if you like, which is, how will I improve? So how will I improve tomorrow, or going forward? Maybe it's celebrating yourself more. um, it could be any number of different things. But yeah, I'd love to hear if you give this simple little prompt to try over 30 days, how it feels, if it changes your sort of ease, your sense of balance. I like to use the word harmony more than balance, but yeah, see if it feels good.
I do
Because
need to.
yeah.
I need to try and employ it. It's not a very British thing to do, Erin. Unfortunately, we're very self-critical and we don't we don't like to celebrate things. But it's definitely an area I need to work on.
Well, you can break that mold. I believe in you, and you can be a champion of this concept in Britain. Yeah.
I'm definitely going to give it a whirl. I do see the value in it, and I see, that if we're just critical all the time and negative all the time about stuff, then it can just drag you down really over time. So there's a balance, like you say, there's harmony to be found between having that celebrating the wins, but also continuing to work on the other stuff and taking steps forward.
Yeah, and I think it's a form of self-care. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's really it isn't it's conscious self-care by acknowledging the things that you're doing well, because then your brain does more of that naturally, because it's being rewarded effectively. Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't know where to start with it because I would be just feel really uncomfortable celebrating stuff. I don't know why. I've always been that way. I've got through my life. I've actually done some things and won some trophies and got certificates for achievements and stuff. I don't know where any of them are. I've got medals, for like military service stuff like that. Don't know where any of them are because for some reason, I have this real objection to celebrating things I've achieved, and I don't know why.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, well, let me ask you this. In the moment of those achievements that you were receiving those medals and badges of honor and things like that, did you celebrate your win then?
No, I kind of brushed it off and said, "Oh, almost like I don't really deserve these."
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a I would encourage you to start small. The wins don't have to be big. Literally getting an email, that email that's been hanging over your head off one day is a win, right? Because you're accomplishing one of your goals and you're taking one step forward. It doesn't, you don't have to, walk on the moon in order to celebrate a win.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what it is, and a lot of the time, when it's things like that, when it's something that need to do or need to get it done, I'll see it as a relief that it's done, rather than celebrate, oh, I've achieved something. It's like, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
I don't know what I honestly couldn't tell you why the mindset is that way, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to improve it, and I will over time, but it just is something that I've only really been conscious of probably the last 6 to 12 months. So it's work in progress.
It's absolutely work in progress. I wouldn't I would urge you not, or anyone with this challenge, not to criticize yourself for not having celebrated wins, because that's again getting your brain into that stress response where you're not super effective and you don't feel good in general. So small, tiny things. I mean, today you showed up. You showed up for this recording. That's a win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it something for me that I'm actually, and that's the thing I'm going to try and celebrate the most at the minute, is consistency, because that's something I, with, not necessarily with this, but with other things in the past, I've really struggled with maintaining that consistency. Whether that's because I've not been that interested in what I've been doing, or for other reasons, something else has come along that I've been more interested in. But with podcasting and the podcast, I've been very consistent, and that consistency is something I'm actually quite proud of. So there you go. How's that?
That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that. See? Wonderful.
yeah, getting there. I've not run out the room yet.
They're small. All of this is designed to be small, intentional, daily shifts. And that's where the magic lies, and just sort of making those shifts that build up to create massive results and transformation and how you live across your life. But there's not pressure, right? To have pressure to achieve this sense of wholeness and harmony is completely opposite to what I'm sort of proposing. It's the idea of just making small incremental actions that literally shift your brain so that your brain will feel that feel good response and crave more of it. And so for example, I don't know, if what you love is if one of the things that you love is spending time, spending 8 hours with on a certain project that's completely unrelated to your work, for example, let's say it's a community project. And that's a lot of time, right? On a weekly basis. But if it provides a good feeling across the board, there's no money that well, let me give you an example, right? So on the side, i I care for dogs. I don't have a dog myself because I'm not at a place in my life where I want a dog. My kids are in college. I'm a homeowner. I want to travel more. I just don't want a dog. But I love dogs. They make me really, really happy. So I have a side hustle where I watch dogs periodically. I board them here at my home. I'm pretty exclusive about who I work with, but this brings me infinite joy that feels so, so good. And I get exercise. I mean, there's just so many wonderful things. And it's not about money, it's about the experience and the result that I get out of that. So I think everybody has those things. It doesn't have to be a side hustle, but everybody knows what those like magical things are that make them feel good, and then they put in this category of I don't have time for that. what I'm suggesting is, if you find time for those, you'll actually help yourself be more effective and more efficient in your work, and experience that sense of harmony by feeding into your soul, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do that, and it's important that I think you just kind of enjoy the journey that you're on then as well, right? You enjoy life and day to day what you're doing and living. I think everything else kind of just falls into place if you can do that.
I think that's absolutely accurate. Yes. I mean, the goal is, I mean, you know, whether we have this one life to live or there's multiple lives that we experience, who knows? The bottom line is, we do have a sense of control over that experience. And I mean, just taking myself for example, um, I was quite sick, bed bound, right? Using devices like wheelchairs and scooters, and it's possible I might need them again at some point in the future. But um, amongst the conditions that I had, once I learned how to manage my stress response, the symptoms were directly more manageable, right? So I just feel better across my life. It's sort of fascinating.
Yeah, and I think as well with that kind of stuff, did that change your perspective on life as well a little when you kind of, because I think we take things for granted. And recently, I think when was it? It would have been August time, so about 4 months ago, um, I got rushed into hospital for a emergency appendectomy where I had my appendix out because it ruptured. Um, and it just makes you think of how quickly things can change, and just really gives you a different outlook on life a little bit.
Well, first, I'm sorry that that experience for you. I'm glad the procedure went okay, and but yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt. I mean, fear hijacks our mood. I mean, forget effectiveness for a moment. It completely hijacks our mood and our ability to interrelate with other people, as well. And I think, when you experience something like you experienced, it can give you a after you've gone through the other side of it, it gives you a renewed sense of perspective. So to answer your question, yes, this is all of this has completely changed my life. Um, but I'll also say that I feel, it's not like my personality has drastically changed. I mean, people who have known me for a lifetime, I'm still the same person, right? I still have the same kind of way of being and stuff like this. I just look at things very, very differently. And even like yesterday, for example, I was out with a pretty bad migraine all day, which meant I had to reschedule all of my things. And on the one hand, it can be emotionally very hard, right? You could feel, I'm a failure. I didn't show up today. But at the same time, the only way to truly help yourself, right, in that process is to support yourself. And so, I just sort of give myself the peace. In fact, yesterday, my win was that I gave myself the peace to rest, that I gave myself that. Was it planned? No. Was it ideal? No. But I gave myself that peace to get through it, which made for a better day and a better day today, right? So it's those, it's not as complicated as people think, and so I've learned in my own experience of thriving amidst all of these challenges. I just feel very compelled to share just this basic science with people, because I don't think that it's talked about openly enough. The information is out there. There's all sorts of scientific journals that support articles that support this. It's just not, at least in our current world, it's not commonly discussed.
No, you're right. It's not commonly discussed, and uh, again, part of the research I did, that even Harvard have released a review on it and saying like celebrating small wins actually boosts motivation and emotional well-being significantly. They've not published any kind of statistic on it, but it's still the fact that they're publishing that shows that there must be something to it, right?
It's absolutely true. And in fact, gratitude is uh, if today's win seems like too much for you and you don't want to dive into all the prompts that I'm recommending, just a simple I'm grateful for today, starting your day with I'm grateful for whatever that is, gets your brain into that parasympathetic executive state. And there's tons of uh, scientific research out there that supports that this happens. It's fascinating. So if there's one thing you take, maybe pull that if that feels easy.
Yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of people on the podcast in the past year about lots of different things, relationships and different areas of life. And step one is always that awareness, really. So
Mhm.
being aware that that, that you're stressed, these things are having an impact on you. This it's not nothing. It's not something you are completely out of control of. It's something that you can't always control stress, the stresses, if you will, but you can control how you respond to them. And that's the thing. And step one is acknowledging that. And if you can
Yep.
acknowledge that, then you will start looking for different ways to deal with it. And you might go through lots of different ways that don't quite work for you, but eventually you'll find things that do help. But
Mhm.
step one is always that awareness and that asking the question, having a look at yourself and thinking, right, what's affecting me and why?
Absolutely. And, that's why I say stressors are real, but stress is a choice. It's an active choice that we play a role in. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah,
Eh,
and we can learn these skills as well. How we cope with stress. So people who deal with high stress situations or are really good in stressful situations is because they have coping mechanisms and they have practice and they've exposed themselves to levels of stress that they can deal with that may push them out of their comfort zone a little, but
mhm.
not to the point where they're going to burn out or break. And they can regulate, deal with it, learn from it, and then next time they can handle more stress. And that's kind of how it works, right?
That's right. That's right.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I uh, my my book, like I said, the whole life planner. It's intended as sort of a set of 90 days, right? There's a bunch of worksheets at the beginning, and then there's these what I call daily pages, which have these prompts on them. You can access the the stress less blueprint, is my free download, and that tells you how to use these daily pages. So you're certainly welcome to get a copy of my book, but the resources are available to you as a free download. And I encourage people to check it out and give it a try, because those small incremental questions are designed. And I've worked with my neurologist to design this, people that have helped me retrain my brain from the concussions that I experienced and some of the other neurological stuff that I experienced. And so I pulled this all together from more than a decade, like 15 years, of dealing with this stuff. In fact, it's been, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work gone into that. Um, Erin, the book itself, is it just all a workbook? Is there is it like chapters from you in there as well, or is it just a workbook start to finish for people?
It's more of a workbook. It's more of a tool. And at the beginning of the book, I describe the system a bit, and there's 20 or 25 worksheets in there that help you align with your values, your goals, understand, you know, what supports you and maybe what doesn't support you. And so it's sort of a little bit of a soul searching experience at the front end of the book that helps you set up your 90-day plan. And then there's 90 days of these pages. I have started working on a proper book, where I tell more about my story and the transformation that I've experienced and how I got to this place. My one of my doctors I saw last week, and a neurologist. He's one of my fans, and he's like, you got to get this out there. You need to share this story with others so people realize, not just from a tool perspective, like accessing the tool, but understanding how I went from um, a really dark, dark, dark place of fear and loneliness and illness and worried about my future to, I mean, my conditions haven't they've actually gotten worse on paper. My conditions have gotten worse, but I manage it such that I'm able to live a pretty awesome life. Yeah. And I think everyone has that within them. They just don't necessarily know.
Yeah, Erin, I think that's why I asked, to be fair, because you do have a quite an interesting story as well. And I think that connection that people can build with you through that sharing that story might encourage them then to go on their own journey and use the workbook and do that kind of stuff and do the work themselves, really, to see. It kind of helps when you can relate to somebody and you kind of somebody's already gone through it and kind of paved the way for them, really.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. 100%.
Where can people find your book, Erin? Have you got a website or is it?
Yeah, so my website is soulvalues.com, soulvalues.com. That's the name of my business. You can find my book there. You can also find my book on Amazon, The Whole Life Planner. And the free download, which includes the toolkit from my book and sort of walks you through it, is available at stresslessblueprint.com. Um, and so, yes, but you can also get it from my website too, whatever is easy for you.
Cool. I'll try and drop a link in the show notes so people can access that stuff easier, save them digging around online and go straight to it.
Thank you.
Um, Before I bring the episode in to land, do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages that you want to share with people?
Yeah, I think that, thank you for that. Your success and your overall well being are absolutely deeply interconnected. And when you regulate your stress response and align your goals across work and life and all the different domains, you can achieve more with greater ease and find more time for what truly matters, whether that's your relationship, your health, your spirituality, and any number of different things. And this is both achievable and sustainable with small daily actions. And you know, so when you it has to do with working together with your own system as opposed to creating dissonance, and that's what I really encourage.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think what you're saying about them small daily actions as well, because them small daily habits really act like they can have a domino effect, right? And shift your mindset, kind of reduce your stress and improve your overall kind of performance in life, really, as a whole. Um, and it's quite, I don't know where I stole this from, but I stole it from somewhere. But essentially, um, we overestimate what we can achieve in a short space of time, and we underestimate what we can achieve over a long space of time. So I think we need to just take that longer timeline approach, that longer horizon approach, take a step back and just try and be consistent, like we said earlier.
Right, that's a great quote. I love that.
Yeah. Erin, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk to us today. Thank you so much. And you shared some really valuable stuff with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. What a wonderful conversation.
Thanks. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.